Anyway, our writing instructions today are clear and simple, and that is to make this a forum for constructive thinking about how we get this country going again. And it is not to be a political point-scoring exercise, or it's not to be about apportioning blame. Well, I applaud Alan's determination to keep this non-political, but on the blame side, maybe I'll just break ranks for a moment, because I think it's very important to recognise, that who is to blame here. We are all to blame. And I say that because all of us are going to have to make sacrifices to get ourselves out of this mess. Yes, it is absolutely true that our regulatory authorities failed us. It is absolutely true that the banking system pursued wholly inappropriate credit policies. But which of us did not take advantage of the soft credit policies to purchase that second home, that third family car, that did not encourage our sons and our daughters to take advantage of soft credit to set up businesses, go over their heads in debt, to set up businesses that seem fit now for much more indulgent times, or did not back the local businesswoman or property developer in setting up a shopping centre, to create jobs for future generations based on a promise of continuing retail demand growth. So I say that in all earnest. In truth, the culture was pervasive. We may not have created that culture, but most of us tolerated that culture. This beloved country of ours is on its knees at the moment, and we face a very difficult challenge in moving forward and getting this country going again. Also, we must remember that it's a small island economy. We are very much dependent on what's happening internationally. We are very influenced significantly also by what's happening in the US. So the global economy, as we all know, is suffering from the worst contraction in over 70 years. A recession and a credit crisis which has seen the demise of the investment banking model in Wall Street, which has seen the mighty Lehman Brothers go to the wall, Bear Stearns, Merrill Lynch, HBOS taken over, and once mighty private institutions like Citigroup, Lloyds and RBS nationalised in all but name. A recession which in fact has asked questions about the future of capitalism itself. So one might ask, should we not be talking here today about the future of capitalism, or do we need a different economic model to move us forward? My own view on that is that capitalism will have to change, but it will remain the economic model of choice going forward. Yes, government are investors and insurers of the last resort at the moment. Yes, without government intervention, producing stimulus packages and packages to deal with the problem of toxic assets, there is no chance that the global economy can set on a recovery path in any reasonable time frame. So government intervention is absolutely needed to kickstart the global economy. It is worth reminding ourselves, however, that even Adam Smith advocated a role for the state in doing what the state might, the market might fail to do, and that is providing education, as an example, and also combating poverty. Smith recognised that the market economy had limitations. Most importantly, he deemed it necessary that proper structures and practices be in place for the market to function properly. And even the most capitalist of bodies, the stock exchange, needs proper regulations and practices to function properly, and has lived with those regulations for many, many years. So the current crisis, in my view, can best be understood as dysfunctional behaviour brought about by the failure to adhere to those regulatory practices and structures. So I would say we may well be seeing, and I hope we are seeing, the end of unbridled capitalism. But the market economy is always certainly going to remain the economic model of choice going forward. But it won't be plain sailing. The stimulus packages announced to date have been enormous. $1 trillion in the US as an example, $600 billion in China. But the scale of the problem is such that even in the US now, the authorities are supplementing the fiscal approach with quantitative easing. effectively printing money, which will mean a devaluation of their currencies, certainly is likely to help in reviving the economy short term, but on the downside, in my view, will lay the seeds for future inflation. It's a high-risk kitchen sink strategy, but at least authorities out there are trying. And I was asked a question beforehand about whether, economic leadership can make any difference. Well, absolutely. If you look at the US, the difference there has been over the last couple of months, a change in attitude among the political leaders over there, and the difference it can make. When will this recovery take place, if at all? For me, the key indicator will be the US housing sector. Just as the collapse of the housing sector in the US signaled the end of the international credit boom, so its recovery will signal the start of a global economic recovery. There will be green shoots later this year, but I think it will be next year before a broad recovery sets in place. In Ireland, our economic difficulties are even more intractable. The economy is likely to contract by 7 to 8% this year, and our unemployment rate is heading to over 12%. Unfortunately, with a budget deficit of over 10% projected for 2009 without corrective action, we do not have the luxury of providing a major fiscal stimulus, nor do we have the option of quantitative easing, at least in a unilateral sense. Critically also, we appear to have lost the confidence and trust of key groups, such as the international investment community in the Irish stock market and a large section of the local employment base here in Ireland. So how do we get this country moving again? Firstly, action needs to be taken straight away to address the immediate crisis in our national finances and get the credit moving again, as Alan said. Secondly, we need to plan a longer-term course of action which will reposition this economy for sustainable growth. This will be a major challenge and will require us to reinvent ourselves on a number of different fronts. For the immediate future, we will have to address our 2009 budgetary position, the paralysis in the banking market, our failed regulatory system, and our labour market. In many respects, these challenges reflect the problems faced by Sweden in the early 1990s, and much has been written about how this model might be applicable to Ireland. In my view, the most important lessons to be learned from the Swedes relates to the principles under which recovery took place and was executed. These principles were transparency, consistency, and most importantly, fairness. And we must try to apply a similar approach here. Our budgetary position first. A balance has to be found between the need to maintain the support of the international financial markets, i.e. reducing the deficit, and the requirement not to place too high a short-term burden on the economy, which would choke off demand and lead to a further fall in exchequer receipts, as well as placing an impossible social burden on the population. A near-term deficit of 10% would, to me, seem to strike a fair balance, but even this will require difficult choices and difficult medicine, and a mix of both taxation increases and expenditure cuts. On taxation, we need to recognise that we have a narrow taxation base in Ireland, with a high number of people out of the tax net completely or paying no tax. Is it fair then to extend taxation to the lower paid? Yes, I believe so, as regrettably, the revenue requirement is so great that it cannot all come from the middle and higher income groups. And remember this has been the most democratic of recessions. We've all got it in the neck. The issue of dealing with the banks is an emotive subject, but not just in Ireland, but abroad also. In Marion, through our one-time Icelandic ownership, we had a front row seat of the first bankruptcy of a Western nation in 30 years, caused primarily by the misadventures and subsequent collapse of the Icelandic banking system. Iceland was the first Western economy since 1976 to have to be bailed out by the IMF. As we worked on their deal to buy back Marion from our previous parent Landsbanki, we visited Iceland on a number of occasions, and we were sad to see the anger in the people up there, angry at their authorities, angry in particular with the bankers and with the regulators. We saw so many very talented, warm, and very dedicated people looking into an economic abyss.